Welcome to the Permanent Change of Station podcast, a place where friends can come together, agree or disagree, and still be friends. Join hosts Lynette and Brenda each week as they discuss topics they've been covering since their days as Army brats living in Germany. No matter the issue, these friends believe it's time for a permanent change of station.
Hello, here we are, Permanent Change of Station with Lynette and Brenda. And today we're going to be talking about the Winter 22 Olympics over in Beijing, China. And there's a lot to unpack there. I think the biggest, hottest topic is the whole doping scandal that came out of that. I will say to you, Lynette, when you said, hey, I want to talk about this topic today, I had to go and read all about it because I haven't been following the Olympics.
And that was interesting when you mentioned that because, not that I think a lot of people haven't necessarily followed the Olympics just because everyone's got a million other things to do and higher priorities and all of that. But right. You used the term, I'm boycotting the Olympics. And so I wanted to kind of hear the story behind that. I kind of have some thought about it as to why, because I know you, but I want you to I don't want to assume anything. So you tell me what that was about.
Well, I just strongly felt that with everything the world has been going through the last 2 years with COVID and the impact worldwide, that the world should have boycotted this event. And this is nothing, of course I care about the athletes, but I just felt like it didn't sit right with me, I guess. So what's your reaction to that?
No, I totally can, understand it. I know that, what was it, 1980, that U.S. boycotted the Olympics in Russia. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And so that is something that I know as a country we've done. And I totally can get and respect anyone that says, I'm not going to tune in. And basically you're making an economic, protest by not watching because, advertisers are basically being paid based on viewership and, all of that type of thing. And so, I can get it. I don't think, I don't get into all the deep of behind the politics, but I don't think there's anyone that would disagree that this whole virus began in China. Okay. It's just, I don't know if there's any credible source to contradict that fact, whether it was something that was a deliberate chemical warfare or just sloppy labs. I don't know, but the genesis of the whole thing, I don't think really there's any dispute as to where it all began. And so I remember even in the 80s, I read this Dean Koontz novel. The name escapes me. It'll maybe come to me before this podcast is over. But I remember reading this book in the 80s, okay, that talked about a man-made virus in a lab in Wuhan, China, and that it was going to cause this global pandemic. This book was, like I said, I read it in the 1980s.
Right.
So for something like this to then come to life, and I remember when I even posted a little bit about that on Facebook, that I got put in Facebook jail. And so maybe even by us talking about it now, we might get put in Facebook jail for just telling. But I'm telling you, I really read the book in the 1980s, and that was the topic. And I totally get that, how, if we are going to boycott anything, I'm a big believer in economic boycotts, and I totally get it. But I got intrigued by these Olympics because, and I'm not really, I should back up and say, I'm more of a Summer Olympics person. I'm more, because I was a track runner myself. Right. I played volleyball, I played basketball. All those sports are, Summer Olympic type sports. And so I've never been really big in watching the Winter Games anyway, but I do tune in typically to watch the ice skating. So when this situation came out, and I think that I'm hopefully not mispronouncing this young lady's name, but Kamila Valieva is how I'm going to say her name for purposes of our conversation today. She is this top rated ice skater, world champion skater who tested positive for this drug. And let me see if I can actually find it. This drug that she tested positive for is called Trimetazidine, which is a heart medication,
right,
which is banned by any of these sport entities that are responsible, whether it be the U.S. Anti-Doping Committee, International Olympic Committee, the Russian Anti-Doping Committee, or whatnot. And so here, from all the sources that I've read, and I'm talking about, I have read everything from, CBS News articles, Yahoo articles, New York Times articles, National Public Radio articles, and all of these have talked about how this particular drug, which has the short name of TMZ, that it is used to treat heart issues, but it also became put on the prohibited substances list because it is hormone and metabolic modulator. And those in these articles, it talked about how if you take this particular drug, it can increase the blood flow to your heart, which could potentially increase the performance of your heart, which may in turn enhance the performance of the athlete. Right. And, and so here's this Russian athlete. She's 15 years old. She's the world best ice skater. But okay. Now, from the news reports I've read, they took her blood test back in December.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And now they're waiting until after she performs, like in February, to now give the results of this test. Now, I have a problem even just from a timing standpoint. How is it that you have this big lag on her, but when you had the Sha'Carri Richardson, again, I'm, a big track person. So, I lived in Eugene, Oregon for 6 years, always hung out at, attending the Prefontaine every year, Olympic trials. In fact, one of our Würzburg American high school classmates, Sabrina Dornhofer, competed in the 1988 Olympic trials, and I was with her. She stayed with me in Eugene, Oregon as she competed. So, I just kind of, follow these things more so as a spectator. So back in the Summer Olympics, there were two athletes. Okay, the first one, and I'm just going to read this article, little excerpt that was published in June of 2021, Dateline, Eugene, Oregon, about this distance runner by the name of Shelby Houlihan. It says Shelby Houlihan was poised to compete for a spot at the games despite a doping ban that she blamed on burrito meat. Athletes complained and a reversal, blah, blah, blah. So let me see if I can find a really good quote. He says, after a whirlwind 8 hours that caused immense confusion across the world of track and field, the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee confirmed on Thursday night that Shelby Houlihan, a distance runner who has blamed a positive drug test on a tainted meat in a burrito she ate, will not be allowed to compete at the Olympic trials on Friday.
Right.
So she got banned not only from the Summer Games, but she got a 4-year suspension. And allegedly, this athlete, again, Shelby Houlihan, 1,500 meter runner, can't compete even in 2024 in the Paris Games. Okay. And then you had the, Sha'Carri Richardson. I mean, I know you did a little, reading up on that. Won't you just kind of for anyone that's not familiar, you tell her story.
That was a case where she came out and said, what's the difference, right, with the situation currently with the Russian ice skater versus her situation. And when it happened, she admitted that she was in the wrong. there was a number of discussions around, was it the International Olympic Committee that ruled her out, or was it actually the U.S. track and field? And what I found looking up on different articles is actually the U.S. track and field team made that decision to not put her on the Olympic roster. They wanted it to be fair for the rest of the athletes. Now, what I don't understand, Lynette, is here we go. Back to Kamila. She got tested in December, and then the Olympics start. She performs in the team event on a Monday, I think it was February the 7th. And then the results from that December test come out. So she's suspended February the 8th,
yes,
right?
That's correct.
And then there's discussion and this, that behind the scenes. And then they reinstate her to be able to perform, through the individual routine.
Yeah.
And so that's not being consistent, I don't think.
Well, the craziest thing as to why they allowed her, there's a story that, again, from all these various news sources that I have read throughout this past week, that, now the burrito story, going back to that first track runner, the distance runner, that just sounds kind of crazy right there. Okay. In the Richardson case, for anyone that never followed her, she was a sprinter who her mother died, and she admitted that she smoked marijuana. Correct. Just as a way of self-medicating her grief. Okay. But marijuana on the prohibited list, if you do it, you test positive for it, you can't compete in the Olympic Games. Now, the story they're trying to say for this 15-year-old is that she accidentally took some of her grandpa's heart medicine. Okay, pause. Now, I have, one child that I have raised to adulthood. I have another one that is 17 years old, going on 30. Okay, I have represented literally hundreds of teenagers throughout my legal career because I did juvenile law. Ain't no 15-year-old confused in 2021 or 2022 as to what medications they're putting in their mouth. Okay, it's just that is not a plausible excuse based on my history and working almost on a daily basis and being a parent of teenagers. Okay, so teenagers are way shrewder than even when we were teenagers. Okay.
Well, yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, they know. Okay, and you're a world-class athlete, and you are not paying attention to medicine bottles. I mean, the whole story about I took grandpa's medicine, I'm not buying. I'm not buying.
And here's the thing: who's actually saying that, Lynette?
Yeah, her handlers are saying that.
That's my point, and you know that it's a very different world in Russia, right?
Yes.
And they seek out and they look at these young children, right, at a very young age, and start seeing who could be a potential contender. And the way they do that is these children or young athletes, they are kept away from their family and friends. For the most part, they're taken under the wing of these handlers, right?
Yeah, so I don't even believe she was living with Grandpa A.
That's my point.
You're in some training camp. Grandpa was not at your training camp or wherever they have. And I can, again, not that I'm any kind of ice skating expert, but I just have one of these long memories. And back in the 90s, there was this always winning world championships, always winning the Olympic gold, ice dancing couple. They were actually husband and wife, Ekaterina Gordieva and Sergei Grinkov.
Right.
I heard their names so much I can be the announcer, whenever they took the ice. Okay. And I found it very suspicious, personally, that I think it was about 1995, Sergei Grinkov, who was only 28 years old, world-class athlete, dies. And what does he die of? Some kind of massive heart something. Okay.
Exactly.
So this ain't any new controversy with Russian athletes, heart issues, heart medications, whatever. And I wouldn't be surprised just on what I have read, what I know, and what is reported, just like you said, of how these athletes are basically identified at a very young age and put into these training, programs to bring honor, to Russia. Okay. And I wouldn't be surprised as if she was given medications that she didn't even have knowledge of what she was taking.
Oh, I agree with that.
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
I would not be surprised. And then she tests positive. So now Sha'Carri Richardson is making it, what's the difference between her and me is a race thing. Okay. Well, I don't believe it's a race thing when the distance runner who just, referenced that she got kicked off, this Shelby Houlihan is a white female who was the 1,500-meter runner at the exact same Olympic trials and got banned just like Sha'Carri Richardson. And so my thing is that it's about being consistent. And, if you test positive, I don't care if you're Lance Armstrong, in the Tour de France, or this Valieva, 15-year-old Russian skater. If you come up with a positive screen, you're out.
Right. And it was pretty tough to watch. I had to go back and watch when she did her individual routine. That was just an emotional mess. It was very hard to watch. It was hard to watch when she got done with her routine, how the handlers treated her.
Yeah, it was a bad deal. My daughter is a volleyball player. I mean, not at that level, but she's at was on a state championship volleyball team and, plays club sports on the national team that travels all the way around. If any coach had basically handled my child after their, routine or program or match, as would be the case of my child, we would have some problems. I mean, it just, to me, was a very painful interchange to watch this 15-year-old kid with cameras in their face, basically being told to, buck up. And another little aspect of this whole Kamila Valieva story was that by allowing her to compete really put strain on the other skaters, because if she had been one of the top three, they had already announced that there would be no medal ceremony because they didn't want to, have something so public and then find out that she, after the fact, she's disqualified, and then they would have to change up the medals.
Right.
And so imagine you're the skater from Japan or, one of the American skaters that, none of them were in the top three, but they were definitely in the top 10 and had the potential to be in the top three. So there were a couple of, a Korean skater, a Japanese skater, they were all up there in that top, tier of possibilities. So imagine if she had placed and you're the Japanese skater that had earned a medal without having any type of doping or testing challenges to you. And this is something you've been training for all your life to accomplish, and you would be denied. I mean, it'd be like, can you imagine, if the Super Bowl champs didn't have that after the championship moment where they're holding the Lombardi trophy and all the, the confetti and all eyes are on you? I mean, it's just crazy. It makes no sense.
I'm right there with you. The other thing I don't understand when we talk about consistency, so Russia has been banned from the Olympics for a long time. And so like this Russian team, they don't even carry the Russian flag. I forget what's the group called?
The Russian Olympic Committee, the ROC.
Well, why is that allowed? What's the difference?
That is definitely something that has to be addressed as well, because my deal is that if your whole country's been banned, then no one should be able to compete.
Exactly.
I mean, so what is the International Olympic Committee allowing these? The buck stops with them, the IOC,
Right.
And so I found this article today that was from just Thursday of this week. And again, going back to this double standard, and this is how so when Sha'Carri Richardson, I'll just read the article. It says, The International Olympic Committee has responded to American sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson's claim there was a double standard concerning her disqualification from last year's Summer Olympic Games and Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva being allowed to compete in the current Winter Olympics after testing positive with a banned drug. Richardson called out the Court of Arbitration for Sport, CAS, earlier this week for its decision to allow Valieva to continue competing in the ongoing Beijing Olympics after the 15-year-old was flagged for using Trimetazidine, which increases blood flow to the heart. The 21-year-old sprinter claimed the difference in ruling between her and Valieva was all in the skin and implied she received a harsher ruling than the teenager because she's a Black young lady. Richardson lost her chance to compete in the 2021 Summer Olympics after receiving a 30-day ban over testing positive for marijuana, which she smoked to cope with the pain she felt after losing her biological mother unexpectedly. IOC spokesman Mark Adams disputed Richardson's double standard claim during the organization's daily press conference. You can't talk about double standards in relation to Russian and American athletes. Each case is individual, he stated. Every single case is very different. Adams further explained, as detailed by Reuters, Richardson, tested positive on June 19, 2021, quite a way ahead of the Tokyo Games. Her results came in early order for USADA, U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, to deal with the case on time before the Games. And Ms. Richardson accepted a 1-month period of ineligibility, which began on June 28th. I would suggest that there isn't a great deal of similarity between the two cases. And so, again, they don't want to deal with the inconsistency. I mean, the article, that's some interesting ice dancing right there. Just in the article.
Yeah. Well, here's the that's a good one. And here's the one back to the question that I have around this whole Russia, the entire country being banned, yet you got Russian athletes competing. And so I'm reading here, it says, so why have Russian athletes continue to compete? A provision in Russia's ban allowed its athletes to compete with special permission and as so-called neutral athletes. In practice then, and to the dismay of rivals and others who had called for a blanket ban on athletes from Russia, the country's athletes can continue to compete in major international events as long as they are confirmed to be clean by the federations that govern their individual sports and as long as they do not do so under the banner of Russia. So here's another example of kind of like tap dancing, right?
Yes, that's what we call in the law a loophole. It's like, so you just basically have created this big out for them to still be able to compete. But the Olympics, I mean, it was always about the countries. You're representing your country in this athletic endeavor. And so, you're not representing your Olympic committee and all of that. It becomes convoluted. But for me, the bottom line where the buck stops in all of these scandals is the IOC, International Olympic Committee. This is on them, and they're allowing these sub-entities to create sub-rules that are allowing prohibited athletes or athletes that should be banned from competing to compete. So there's so many more ways we could carry on this discussion, but we have run out of time.
Yes, we have.
And so we just encourage you, if you like what you're hearing, continue to help spread a good word. And this is Lynette and Brenda in Permanent Change of Station signing off.
You've been listening to Permanent Change of Station. Tune in each week for the latest episode on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your podcasts. And while you're there, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. Join us online at pcspodcast.live and on our social media platforms. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.